Hello friends, welcome. Friends, on 9th of May, TRAI came out with the terms and condition for assignment of spectrum for certain satellite-based communication services. Now friends, I have already done a video on this subject and I also in that video analyzed Starlink business case in India. I will paste a link of that video in the description and anybody who has not watched that video can go through that video. It's quite detailed analysis on how TRI recommendation impacts Starlink. Now friends, this video is not about this recommendation. This video is going to be pretty interesting because someone yesterday pointed me to this article about Brazilian regulator authorizing 7,500 Starlink satellites to operate locally. And friends, I was very confused when I saw this article. Because when somebody spoke with me regarding this article, I could not understand how can a regulator authorize 7,500 Starlink satellites to operate locally. And let me explain why I was confused and surprised. This is because of the following reason. Now, if you go to this website, which I showed you in that video also, this is called Satellite Map Space, which kind of provides us with a map of Starlink satellites which are currently live, right, in space. There are around 5,500 or 6,000 satellites which are operating right now. So you can see that these satellites which are live on the surface of the Earth, and if you look at India, you'll find that roughly around 39-40 satellites are active at a time on the surface of the Earth because these satellites are moving at a very fast pace, right? So they are never static in any point of time. So even if the count is less than 7,500 at a time on the surface of the Earth in a particular geography, let's say India, there will be a certain fixed number of satellites. And as the satellite moves away from their location toward this direction, so other satellites will take over, right? Similarly, if you look at the situation as far as Brazil is concerned, where is Brazil? Brazil is here. You will find that there will be similar situation at a time. At a time, you will never find more than maybe 50 or 60 satellites. So the question of allowing 7,500 satellites to operate locally means what? That's the question that we are going to investigate. And while I investigate this question, I will take you through satellite frequency management and how the regulators all over the world are trying to coordinate two satellite service providers to operate with each other so that they are not going to cause tremendous amount of interference with each other's services, and how regulators can also prevent market monopoly because satellite spectrum is given through an administrative mechanism. This is not auction. So there has to be a monopoly which regulators have to control because there could be some service providers who will go much ahead and have a much larger density of satellites. When a new satellite provider comes into play, then he will face problem because a lot of spots will already get occupied by the earlier entrant. The new entrant will face problems. So we are going to talk about how this aspect is also dealt by various regulators. So friends, this video is going to be very, very interesting. Those who are interested to know technical details in very simple terms, they should be with me and you will get a very good understanding about this subject matter. Not from the point of view of understanding each and every aspect, but on a high level, you will have a very clear understanding how these services operate and what is that Brazilian regulator is trying to do, which people will find very confusing because of the reason which I explained, right? So let's go to my slide deck without wasting any time, right? So this is the slide deck which I have prepared, which talks about how regulator manage satellite spectrum. Because as I take you through this slide deck, you will understand the implication of Brazilian regulators announcement, where what they have done is, let me just show you the article also. They have enhanced their permission from 4,408 satellites, Starlink satellites, to 7,500 Starlink satellites to operate locally, which means nothing. And you will understand why it means nothing. And as I already showed you that at any point of time in this map which I showed you, that number of satellites which are operating over a particular country is never going to be 7,000 because 7,000 is a global, 7,500 is a global count, right? So let's go to this presentation. So how regulator manage satellite spectrum? The global versus national story, we will explain in simple terms for everybody to understand, right? The regulation, the satellite regulation problem. Now, satellites always operate globally, unlike in case of terrestrial network, which are operating locally. So you have got full control over the terrestrial network from the point of BTS till the time when the BTS connects to a mobile. So all the links end to end, including the backhaul, is under the control of national regulators. Whereas in case of satellite, the situation is slightly different. Actually, it is remarkably different compared to a terrestrial network, because when you launch a satellite in the sky, in general, the local regulators do not come into play from the point of view of managing the overall deployment of satellite globally, unless and until they are called upon to give their clearance so that they have no objection. That's all. If there is an objection, then there could be some refinement here and then which has to be done. Otherwise, from a global point of view, it is managed by ITU. And outer space treaty means that when a satellite is flying on the surface of the earth over a particular country, it does not fall within the jurisdiction of the country. That is called space is global for its commons. It is not like, if let me just go to that particular chart again. So Brazil cannot say that everything that flies on over the surface of Brazil will have to, the entity has to take permission from Brazil or India or any other place, right? As long as it has been coordinated through the ITU forum, the slots and orbital frequencies, all entities are allowed to function in outer space, because space is a global common as per the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Right? Now, from a national point of view, you are only controlling ground communication. You are not controlling the capability of the satellites flying on top of your country. It can fly. Unlike in case of aviation, since the aircraft flies on the surface of the earth close to in the airspace of that country, it considered as an airspace of the country, and therefore you require permission. For example, when this Pahalgam attack happened, Pakistan closed its airspace and India also closed its airspace. So our aircraft had to fly, without going through Pakistan, through the Indian Ocean, right, or the Arabian Sea. Similarly, but in case of satellite, this problem is not there, because satellites are not flying within the country's jurisdiction. The space is for global commons. Okay. So overflight is free, service requires permission. Now, the role of ITU, as I already explained, ITU is the global satellite coordination body. It assigns global orbital slots and frequencies to prevent harmful interference. So they lay out rules so that some satellites like GSO means global stationary synchronous geostationary synchronous orbit satellites, when they are operating along with the non-geosynchronous satellites, they do not interfere with each other. So those rules are laid out by ITU. Does not authorize market within a particular country. So particular country market is the right of the national regulator. ITU does not come into picture. The satellites will keep flying on like today, if you see, even before the TRAI recommendation, the Starlink satellites are still on the surface of India. Can you see this? In India, right? But they are not allowed to operate. They are not allowed to operate services, right? So, unless the regulator allows, the transmission of these satellites are blocked within the surface of that particular country, which which hasn't given regulatory permission yet. So, next, national regulators the national regulators are the key decision makers. Now, national regulators control local market access. For example, FCC US, TRAI DOT in India, and Anatel Brazil, right? And I will explain what the implication of Brazil decision is. Now, USA, the FCC model. So there are different types of model for managing interference or access for a particular satellite operator to operate within a frequency band in a particular country, right? The US does not limit the number of satellites. Brazil has number of satellites limited. Now, implication of what Brazil has done, I will explain later. But US does not follow the regulatory limit that what Brazil has announced, like which has been reported by Reuters, right? If you see here, which has authorized 7,500 Starlink satellites to operate locally, right? And I will explain what implication it is going to be for Brazil, right? And what is that they're trying to control, and what kind of flaws that exist in their regulation, right? In case of US, the FCC model focuses on spectrum usage rather than limiting the number of satellites. And how they are controlling spectrum usage, I will explain. It talks about dynamic sharing and interference rule, and this is the delta T by T 6% threshold. I will explain right now. Let's go to, for that, let me go to my article, right? This article I wrote on 9th August 2023. This is called Satellite Interference Management, and I'm going to paste a link of this article in the description, right? So let me first explain to you what is satellite interference and what the regulators are trying to manage. Now, first is ITU. As I told you, there is two types of satellite. One is the GSO, another is NGSO, right? So if you look at this chart, you will find that the GSO is on top. NGSO is quite in the lower orbit, because NGSO has to move at a very faster pace around the surface of the Earth, and in order for it to remain in orbit, the speed has to be pretty high. And the geostationary speed is low, but the distance is very, very high, and it remains in synchronous to the orbital motion of the Earth. Right now, every spectrum which is opened up for GSO is also opened up for NGSO. So what ITU will do, they will create a coordination mechanism where the amount of interference is managed by called a power flux density limit, which they impose on NGSO and the ground terminals, so that the GSO is not getting interfered. I will not get into the details of it. You just need to understand there are certain power emission rules which ITU will decide. So this is one. The second situation is, which I am going to explain to you, which FCC follows. Like if you see here, that there are two operators, let's say. One is operator A, another is operator B. They are operating simultaneously as NGSO, and their satellites are moving like this, for example, right? Now, there could be a mechanism of ensuring that both the operators coordinate among each other. When they coordinate among each other means that they will try to ensure that whenever a satellite is in close proximity to another satellite, for example, operator A is on top of operator B. So then what happens is that on the ground, there will be interference, because when the operator A satellite is running its signal down below, it will also collide with the operator's B signal. So in a situation like this, there could be some coordination rules which the operator A and operator B can mutually decide. Okay. But when they are not interfering with each other, there is no problem. Everybody can use the full block of spectrum. Let's say if you have a block of spectrum like this, everybody can use the full block of spectrum, because neither operator A and operator B are interfering with each other. But in this case, what FCC has done is saying that, look, you decide on your coordination rule, but in case if you fail to achieve a mutually agreed coordination rule, then we will come out with a formula. That formula I explained to you here, which is called delta T divided by T 6% threshold. Now, you don't have to understand what delta T divided by T 6% threshold is. Let me explain in simple terms. The meaning of this is that when the interference between operator A and operator B exceed a certain threshold limit, which is measured by delta T divided by T, then the two satellites interfering with each other will split the mega band, which, let's say there's a 2 gigahertz of spectrum. It will split in 50% and 50%. Both will operate only in 50% of the total bandwidth, because of this because of this interference which is taking place, and if there are no coordination rule which they have decided among themselves. So this is what FCC has come out with in order to manage spectrum interference between two different operators, three different operators. The similar kind of a policy will have to be executed. Now, India TRAI, DOT, India has not yet, though the recommendation has come out. If you look at the India's spectrum recommendation, this is the recommendation, and I'll show you where India is talking about managing interference. So let me just go down below. And when I click on recommendation, and you see here in the recommendation, what it is saying is that there is a possibility that, look at this, a provision should include a terms and condition of assignment of frequency. In that case, in case the need arises, the government may prescribe a framework of sharing of spectrum in higher frequency bands, so and so, so and so. So, and it is also saying that TEC will come out with a sharing mechanism. So today, the TRAI has not come out with any rule, right, for sharing, unlike what FCC has done here, right? If you see here, in FCC has these rule, and there are certain nuances of this rule which I don't want to get into. But TRAI is saying that, look, we are still not reached that stage. When the stage will come, then rules will get defined, because anyway, it is an administrative assignment and we can change the rules depending upon what is in our national interest, right? Now let's go to what Brazilian regulators have done. Now let's understand this rule, that in 2025, it has approved Starlink for 7,500 satellites. It will look very confusing for the viewers of what is going on, because 7,500 satellites will never operate locally simultaneously on top of Brazil. Now, let me explain what I think what is going on is as regards Brazil is concerned. So I will go again to that map, which is satellite-map.space. Now here, if you look at, let's go to Brazil. Now here, if you look at Brazil, and let me just zoom in a bit so that this becomes a little bit more clearer. You can see at a time, maybe not more than 60 satellites are in the simultaneously available on top of Brazil. Now, initially that number was 4,600 something, right? Now it has been enhanced to 7,000. Now my understanding is the following, and viewers may correct me if I'm wrong. See, that 4,500 or 7,500 are the total number of satellites, not just what is going on top of Brazil, throughout the surface of the earth, right? Now, there is a possibility that a certain percentage of satellites, which you can accurately calculate, of that 7,500 will be simultaneously active on the surface of Brazil, or on the jurisdiction of Brazil at a time, right? And that number can be 60, 70, depending upon what normally the situation is, right? Because the way these satellites have been structured, how the orbital slots have been allocated, etc., right? Now, as the number increases, the proportion of satellite on top of Brazil will also increase. Now, let's say Brazil did not give the permission to enhance the number from the earlier number of 4,408 to 7,500. Let's assume that they did not give. Then what would have happened? See, Brazil would not have stopped, right? There was no way for Brazil to stop Starlink to put so many satellites on the surface of the earth. Starlink, from that number of 5,500 number that they have today, they will keep on expanding the number going forward, right? So the number of satellites which will be visible on the surface of Brazil will also increase proportionately. Let's say at the time when it was 4,400 plus, it was, let's say, 50. Now when it goes to 7,500, the number goes to, let's say, 100. I'm just making it up. So what Brazil is saying is that, look, you need to make so many satellites active on the surface of Brazil, means looking at Brazil at a time as if that you have only 4,500, means that 100 satellites which are flowing on the surface of Brazil, right? Because the density has now increased from 4,400 to 7,500, you have to switch them off. You will only make 50 satellites or 60 satellites, right, active at a time, but you will not raise it to 100, because as you raise the number to 7,500, 100 satellites will be active at a time in Brazil. You will say that you will switch off those 40 satellites and you will not make it active. That is what the meaning of this is. Now, what does it mean? Actually, from a practical point of view, the practical point of view is that if, let's say, Brazil has got 2 gigahertz of spectrum, which has been given to the satellite operators, which includes Starlink, then it is trying to restrict the usage of that spectrum for Starlink to an amount so as to prevent monopolization of the market. So it's saying that you can't really consume the full capacity of that band. You will limit yourself to only 50 satellites, even if the number of satellites that you have launched over the surface of the earth, which are active simultaneously, is much more than what you have today. And that's what the implication of this order is, right? This is the order. Now you understand what is the meaning of this order. So now let's go to this presentation. Now, what is the disadvantage of making a situation like this, right? See, what happens is that if you have number of satellites, you're only counting number of satellites and not creating a mechanism which FCC has done like this, then you cannot avoid this situation which I was explaining to you, right? How will you deal with a situation like that? You need to come out with new rules. So first is that you have to limit the number of satellites, right? Which is going to limit the number of capacity and Starlink ability to offer number of subscribers, because more the number of satellites, more service Starlink will be able to offer, more customer they will be able to serve. But you will never be able to deal with a situation like this unless you come out with specific rules or you rely on the operator's good faith coordination. Right? So you understand that why it is insufficient, and this is not the practice which typically people use. They ensure that if the spectrum is available, because satellite spectrum is always going to be inefficiently used, because there can't be so many operators to be able to leverage the full quantum of spectrum. It is such a large bandwidth. There number of base stations, number of satellites are so limited compared to number of base stations which terrestrial networks have. Satellite may be, only 5% of them. I'm just making it up. It may be even less. 5% of the total capacity of the spectrum can be used at a time. You can clearly see from this map, which is currently in front of you. You can see that at a time, there are so less number of satellites, because if I choose OneWeb, you can see that how thin OneWeb's density of satellite is compared to Starlink. There is nothing. You see, this is OneWeb. So that's why it is not possible for anybody to use satellite spectrum to the maximum efficiency possible. And that's why satellite spectrum is not given on an exclusive basis, because it is going to lie waste otherwise. You understand? So that is what this problem is, the Brazil regulators problem. So it is technically weak. It is rare globally. Nobody actually uses this kind of approach. So that's the flaw in Brazilian method, which I've explained. Satellite can't be switched off over countries. Spectrum crowding, beam density is the issue, not satellite count. Controlling satellite number is ineffective technically. It is easier to manage the beam so that the beams are otherwise what will happen if you are going to limit the number of satellites, the number of subscribers in your country is going to get limited, and your price that the operators will be able to offer can't be reduced because the volumes will be less. So it does not solve any problem, right, by doing this. Okay, so what regulators agree on: no harmful interference, good faith coordination, national market control, and I2 global rules will apply. So the key takeaway for you viewers is satellite overfly freely on the surface of the earth over a country. Nobody has any kind of restriction. Like if there is a war, you can't stop a satellite. You can shoot down a satellite, but you cannot stop. Legally, you cannot stop a satellite, but you can stop aircrafts because it lies within the jurisdiction of a country, airspace of a country. Service required national authorization. US is having a spectrum sharing kind of approach. India is careful. It has not released its recommendation. It has left to DOT to come out with sharing rules, which will come. And Brazil is following a unique technique of managing satellite interference and monopolization to satellite ground. So conclusion is balance of global freedom plus national control. Mega constellation will drive regulatory debate, and spectrum sharing, not satellite limit, is the future. So I think, friends, you probably understood why this article was so important, and that's led to me investigating this issue a little bit deeper so that people do not get confused with such headline, because when articles like this are written by journalists, they don't understand this issue technically, because these issues needs to be understood in a holistic manner to able to make out what are the implication of such announcement. Another problem is that these kind of rules which Brazilian regulator come out with is written in Portuguese, which I can't read. So therefore, it becomes a challenge to really understand what is going on unless you translate it. Thanks for your time, friends. And I hope that you have liked this video and understood the implication of articles like this. And let me know if you have anything else to discuss. Just give me give me in the comment section. You can basically write whatever you want me to discuss in the next video. And thanks for listening to the end. And I'll come back with a new video on a new topic next time. Thank you very much.